Greetings, Kerbonauts! This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is episode number 15 of Project Ares. Normally our real solar system series, but right now we are still playing on only the new planets of the Galileo planet pack on Gale for the moment, still exploring our close system. We're looking at the new moons. We're looking at Iota and Ceti. That's what this launch in the background here is. This one's trying to go to Ceti. We'll see whether or not it makes it real soon. So there's no real solar system yet, but we will get back to that. I had been launching this thing up to Ceti after rebuilding it because of how Ven's stock wasn't working, although now I have it reinstalled, a version that supposedly works in 1.2. I haven't tried it out yet, but I will try it out soon and we'll see if that works. Another thing that was not working was my brain. I, in the last episode, thought that we were launching from the equator, but we're actually 9 degrees up north of the equator, and so just going east does not put you in a nice intercept with the moon that is along the equator of this planet Gale. Likewise, it means when going to Ceti, I thought that I was going in the right direction, but it turned out I was off by another 9 degrees, and when I realized I was off, I went the wrong direction in order to try and fix it. And so then I had to go way off my prograde vector. You can see my prograde there in the nav ball is way off from the direction we're pointing right now, because I'm trying to make up that difference. In the end, this is going to be a serious problem. But anyway, we had gotten Ven's back to working, as I said. Another thing that had not been on, I noticed, was my comm network, the new thing in 1.2 with all the cool communication stuff. And I wanted that working, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't. And then I think I realized maybe it only works in science mode and career mode. And I'm in sandbox, of course, but I want it. So I checked the options, and I didn't see it. And so I hacked my save game file. In there are some lines that are very easy to see. They were just as easy to see as it was to see that this flight was not going to work. I couldn't get out of the atmosphere because of that early failure to point in the right direction. Arrgh! We're going to have to launch again. Anyway, I found those lines in the saved game for the comm network. They allow you to turn it back on again, so I did that, and now I have the comm network working, even though I'm in sandbox. There were some other things I changed while I was there. I noticed some other options, like requiring a signal in order to have control over things. So I turned that on. It had been off. I also turned on that you get a plasma blackout when you're doing reentries. And I turned on pressure limits for parts. So presumably if they get too high pressure, they will break. I also turned on G limits for parts. Same idea. G forces get too high and the parts will presumably break. Haven't tried any of this yet, so we'll see how it goes. Oh, and last, G limits for Kerbals. So you re-enter too fast and you'll squish them, put their eyeballs into the back of their head, and they won't be able to breathe and whatnot, and lose blood to their brains and die, or some such. We'll find out how that works. Maybe, hopefully not, actually. Anyway, let's get back to this flight heading for Ceti, this newly rebuilt whole launcher and a new satellite. While looking at our orbital view here, you're going to see some airplane icons. Those are just some markers that I've placed into my saved game so that I can see where the orbits are of the moons a little bit closer to Gale. They have the same inclination as those moons, and so by having them close up like that, it allows me to visualize their orbits a little bit better. Anyway, once we get our satellite up here into orbit, I use up the very last of the fuel in that stage without thinking about the fact that now I'm going to have orbital debris, and it would be really nice to not have any, so I think I might go back to using that same rule I had in Project Gateway, no orbital debris. I like adding those restrictions for myself. But we have some with this launch. We leave that behind and we get our satellite separated and the solar panels opened up. The communications will get opened up. We'll do our scanning antenna once we reach the actual Ceti moon. While we head off to Ceti here, I'll talk a little bit about the base politics for a bit. Tell you what's going on down there on the ground as I rotate the craft around here to let you get a good look at it. Anyway, head count was done and there are 42 Kerbals on the base. Krantz is in charge of everyone, Joseph is second in command, and the rest are divided into a few groups. The total administration of the base, there's just 5 Kerbals who made it through to this side. We have a military group who's patrolling the outside edge of the base. There's just 5 of those. They're making sure that There are no dangerous creatures on the planet or in the woods roaming around the hills out there. So far it's safe, but you never know on an alien planet what stuff might pop up. Here we go. We're getting a nice view of the planet as we move away from it. I'm using my new 6 Degrees of Freedom mouse to look around. That is a very pretty planet from up here. We have 7 scientists who are all working on various projects, 3 trained pilots, 14 space engineers, and we also need some just basic things, like they need food. So we have 4 Kerbals farming. We also need infrastructure, crafts and construction, remodeling, building out areas of the base as necessary, handling the tech support for all of the electronics and all of that. So there's 4 Kerbals doing that for a total of 42 on the base. Outside of that, as far as we can tell, the entire planet was empty when we arrived, just vegetation out there. Okay, the flight has been relatively uneventful. We've gotten here, set up an intercept. I brought the periapsis in close to the planet and then realized, no, wait a minute, I'm probably going to want to go into a polar orbit. So I adjusted it once again, shifting that down to a polar orbit, which is really easy to do from this far out from something with so low gravity. I can do it just with the RCS, and that's what I'm doing. I noticed that my fuel is really low, but I did load a lot of monopropellant on it, so I start off using retrograde mono until we get closer to the maneuver node. Then I fire up the engines for just a few seconds. Maybe it was even 2 seconds. There was almost no fuel left. But we did have a lot of monopropellant, and by keeping that retrograde mono going out there that whole time, I'm able to actually catch an orbit. Now, it didn't circularize at a low orbit. I did need to go all the way back up one more time, back around again, and then finally capture a nice low circular orbit. But in this case, it's not about the journey, it's about the destination. We got where we wanted to go, and from here we'll be able to start our scanning of the surface. We can also check our gravity meter and see how much force there is, which by knowing that it's a 150 kilometer radius planet, just by measuring it, that'll give us the mass, and then we'll know the GM, and that will give us the information we need for the delta V so that we can come here and land on the surface later and do things like capture orbits more efficiently in the future. So now with the scan going, we can pop up that ScanSat scanner and take a look at the current map. The first map that comes up is actually of Gale, and I let it completely go so that I can take a look at Gale since it's been finishing the scanning since then. And then we flip over and look at the actual Ceti scan map. However, on this one, I noticed that the satellite is going very, very slowly. It's scanning very slowly. You can tell because all these little blue lines and orange lines here are in 2 separate groups. That must mean that the planet, the moon itself, is rotating very, very slowly. It is rotating, otherwise we would only have one track that goes up and down. But it's rotating so slowly that it's going to take a long time before it completely scans the surface. It keeps going around and around over the same area that it's already checked. Alright, the next flight has already begun. You can see that this one has a manable capsule at the top, but there is no Kerbal inside yet. We are doing some tests. I don't want to run this test with an actual Kerbal in there. The first test is I'm using 4 gimbal engines at the bottom instead of using fins to try and keep my orientation, because the fins were keeping me from being able to really maneuver it. Maybe the gimbal engines will give me more maneuverability without forcing me to go straight through the air on the prograde vector. Other than that, we're theoretically testing out the regular launch, just get this up into an orbit, then deorbit it and watch the heat shield, watch the parachutes, make sure that if we're bringing our Kerbal back that they would survive. Later we'll get around to testing the actual life support system, and this flight will let us look at the delta V that gets used and how much is needed, so we'll have some idea of what it would take to get this into a higher orbit for scientific testing, or who knows what we might be doing up there. I'm making a list of all the things that need to be fixed. And for starters, I noted on the launch pad that there were no lights, and we've got to put some lights on it, and you can't have too many lights. The next problem is when we decouple that first stage, it immediately gets grabbed by the air and starts flipping, and so it sort of looks like it clips through the engine, and I don't like that. Our solution is probably going to be that we just need to get higher before we drop it, and to do that, we probably need to put more fuel in it. I probably needed more fuel in it anyway, though, because chances are this isn't going to have enough delta V to do all the things that I might like to do, such as perhaps even do a flyby of a moon or something. Then right about here, I start thinking of what's going to happen when I shut that engine down and how I'm going to want to maneuver this. And usually I like to use the RCS that's down on the bottom, but I have RCS that's on the top that I don't want active when the bottom one is active, and so I'll need to disable that in the VAB and set up an action group in order to re-enable it once we get up into orbit. Which also reminds me, other action groups haven't been set up. I did the abort key for the launch escape system, but I haven't done any other action groups, and so that needs to be done too. Next, I started thinking, what if I don't put more fuel, but I try to use some SRBs in order to get higher up, and I keep the throttle on the fuel lower, and then throttle it up after the SRBs have burned out. Which then reminded me that I don't have any SRB thrust curves set up yet. There's nothing in stock. Stock supports it now. You don't need real fuels in order to do it, but none of the stock SRBs actually do it. I need to create a config for that. And then around there, I decoupled to the second stage, and the third stage didn't actually separate, so I have a problem to fix there. As well as an issue with the launch escape system. When I jettison it, it leaves behind a decoupler, so the decoupler needs to flip over and go in the other direction. And finally, once I have decoupled that last stage that has the capsule, I realize there's no remote control without a Kerbal on board. So any further testing we'll have to do once we add a new remote control. First, we'll do a quick test of the abort sequence. Pressing the abort key causes the capsule to fly up in the air, testing with no Kerbal inside. Hopefully we'll be quick enough with our parachutes to prevent it crashing down into the ground. Most likely, if we have to activate this, it'll be in the middle of flight though, and so we'll have plenty of time. For the next test, before we do an actual full unmanned test flight, I heard stock can now support thrust curves on SRBs, and that's one of my favorite features from my real solar system install, so I want to set that up. The first test didn't go so well though. If you look right here, you will see that there's a thrust indicator, and what should happen, based on the curve that I've set up, is it should start out high and then go low. That's a very simple curve that I created to just start at 100% and drop down to 0. But it hadn't done anything the first time. Turned out that I had misspelled the word module in the config file. Simply spelling it correctly gets it working. And now if we want it, we can have thrust curves on our SRBs again. Yay! The curve is based on how much fuel is remaining of the type that the engine the curve is on still has left. So when it's at full fuel, it'll be 1.0, and when it is at 0 fuel remaining, it'll be 0. And then I can control how much thrust it is, anywhere from even more than 100% down to 0%, or maybe 1%, I think it keeps a minimum, and set whatever I want. So I'll make use of that on some future flights. I thought that I was going to use it on the next test of the actual capsule to launch, but it turned out that I had a slightly better idea. Instead, we're going to use the SRBs for the initial boost to get off the ground. We'll have the throttle on the engines at almost 0%. Then, as the SRBs are burning out, we can throttle up the main engine, decouple the SRBs, and that will get us high enough so that we don't have to worry about some of the problems we were having before. This flight still showed me something I wanted to fix. I think I should put some struts on the top of those SRBs. Did you notice when it lifted off how they wiggled a little bit? And I don't want that to happen. Here's a good angle that shows how the main engine is actually still offline right now. One thing I'll have to do when I launch for real is remember to throttle up before the SRBs run out of fuel. Notice here how because I didn't throttle up first, I have some difficulty after the decoupling keeping myself oriented. I almost lose control, but at least we're still under 300 meters per second. And that means I'm able to regain control before it's too late. From here up, it's relatively straightforward, so this will give me a chance to talk about my real solar system version of this series. Some people have been asking, is the other thing completely over, or is this just a spin-off? No, this is all still one world. Remember, we had the Kerbals on Kerbin and Kerbals on Earth, and they both had storylines going, and we were only really looking a lot at the one of the storyline on Earth. Now we're going to look a little bit at the storyline of what the Kerbals were doing back on Kerbin, and as you can see, they've shifted off into this alternate universe. Eventually, we'll combine the two stories back together again, but I'm waiting for the RSS install to be completely up to date, and not all the mods are ready. Even though RSS itself was ready, not all the rest of the things that I was using with it are ready. Plus, I'm thinking I might make one more change. I might be switching over to using Realism Overhaul on it, because making all of my own parts all the time has turned out to be too time consuming, and I just won't be able to produce enough content. That means we need to wait for Realism Overhaul to be ready, and that one is also not ready as of this moment right now. Plus, I'm still on 1.2.1, and I was thinking I might try to update this to 1.2.2, because that's what all the other mods are on, and every now and then I get a little flashy indicator going, hey, you're not up to date, you should switch to be up to date. And so, to get rid of all that and to be concurrent with everybody, I probably should switch just one more time. Anyway, as for this launch, everything else was relatively straightforward. We made it to orbit, we were able to decouple everything okay, until we get to actually releasing the capsule and decoupling that. That's still getting stuck. When you go into warp speed, you can get two things that are stuck together to separate, because when you're in warp, the collision doesn't work anymore, and so you can see how they slide apart. But that's not how I want to fix it for real. I want to find a way to make them not get stuck in the first place, so we'll still have to find that. Once we are free, I can get that lower stage out of the way to protect the upper stage, then experiment with the engines, and eventually bring it back in for our first re-entry testing. If this goes well, then we can send it Kerbal up next time. Now that we have a remote control unit on the top, we can actually control it, even though there's no Kerbal yet. So after a little bit of engine testing and then swinging around to the other side of Kerbin, we can decouple and do the good old-fashioned re-entry testing. You've seen this a bunch of times in all kinds of different videos. So we're just going to skip to the end. Well, except for this part. This was cool. Look in the upper left, you can see a streaking bit of debris. The lower stage that I had just under me a moment ago was visible burning up in the atmosphere. That was pretty cool. But anyway, the landing of the capsule was fine. We got our drogue chute, main chute, and the water splashdown. I think we are now ready to give it a real test. Let's put a Kerbal in there, find one of our three pilots, and be on our way. And there we have it. Riza Kerman, first Kerbal into this solar system. Test successful. She's back on the ground and planting a flag to commemorate the occasion. Apparently as the drogue chute rolls on by. Now before we wrap things completely up, we need to check in on the Kerbals and see how they've been doing investigating that strange signal that was coming from somewhere in the solar system. Something that seemed like a distress beacon from last episode.
We've isolated the signal.
Put it on the main screen.
We're on the fourth planet. Here. The signal is coming from the surface of the fifth planet. Here. This is the best magnification we can get from this distance.
I'll tell Joseph right away. He'll want to know what we found. And we'll never be able to tell what's over there unless we send a reconnaissance satellite, so we should get that mission planned right away.
Alright, Kerbonauts, that's almost it. We're starting a launch here that we'll see next time. This one goes up to 2.5 meters size, and it is on its way to the next planet out in this solar system where we're detecting that strange signal. The satellite is packed with scientific instruments to see what's going on. This is just a test flight. It has a whole bunch of problems that need to be fixed before we can go on. It's got problems with the engine effects, and it wiggles a lot. It needs action groups. The fairings aren't quite right. The decouplers are sometimes too strong. We need some extra battery on there. There's a bunch of things, but we're going to take a look at that next time. Until then, I will see you later, Kerbonauts.
Yeah. Is it? Hi. Oh, okay. That one right there. Okay. I've been chewing gums. We've isolated the signal.
I'll make it excited.
Okay. We've isolated. We've isolated the signal. We've isolated the signal. Okay. This is the best This is the best. I can't. This is. I need water. Oh, okay. Oh, you're mean. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Your toe. I know. This is the best This is the best This is the best magnification we can get from this distance. This is the best magnification. This is the best magnification. That sounded weird. This is the best magnification we can get from this distance. That's the best one. Woo.